Any and every workspace has a few things that make a difference to your productivity, whether it's the tech behind it, a desk that goes up or down, or naturally the chair you sit on day to day. Now, when it comes down to whatever it is between you and the floor, it's typically something you don't want to sacrifice on if you can do so, and while there's a lot of chairs out there, not many of them are literally built from the ground up for big and tall people. Now, what I've been using lately is the LiberNovo Maxis Airflow chair, meant for all of those big and tall like myself, and it's rare to actually have something literally specialized for your comfort. In this case, I'm about 6'2" at 265 pounds, and while I could technically fit on the other LiberNovo options at the top end of the recommended measurements, Maxis Airflow does take comfort to another level. In this case, it's primarily meant for people between 5'10" and 6'7", and it can support a weight up to 399 pounds. Now, compared to something that might be a little bit more one size fits all, this not only caters to those larger people like myself, but it's also incredibly dynamic, being that most people actually move about 13 times an hour, and typically static chairs don't really adjust to your body compared to something like this. Now, as for getting this thing together, starting with the assembly and sort of working my way up with this chair, it did take me about half a vinyl record to put this thing together. For myself, I did throw on my new 50-cent record and went to town putting this together, and again, maybe it took me about 15 or 20 minutes. Now, this was partially assembled right out of box, and the instructions is literally a cardboard slab, which makes this pretty easy to follow, and the first thing that stood out to me here about this chair is actually just the quality of it. Now, it's something as simple as the base and legs having a premium feeling right out of box, being that it's an aluminum alloy, and it actually feels pretty heavy, which is a good sign starting out, and popping in the casters is easy enough, and they do sort of feel like a bit of a rubber material, which should help avoid any sort of floor damage when rolling about. Still, I do always recommend a floor cover or mat wherever possible. Overall, it's actually built pretty well, and no part of this chair feels floppy, which is always a good sign. Now, moving over to the adjustments of this chair, I'm sort of going to work my way up, but the first thing you notice under the chair here is a knob here that adjusts the tilt tension, which changes the resistance for all your levels of recline. In this case, there is no sudden drop here once you hit like the halfway or 60-degree mark like a lot of chairs. This actually keeps you supported throughout the entire recline range, which is pretty awesome. And for adjusting this with the knob, it's the standard righty-tighty, lefty-loosey in this case. When it comes down to the actual tilt adjustments though, this feels pretty thought out here because there are more angles than a typical chair you might find. This does have a 105, 115, 125, 135, and a 160-degree recline option, which is going to be fantastic depending on what you're doing day to day, whether it's working, gaming, reading, lounging, whatever the case might be. Now, one of the things I did notice that's a little bit more interesting with this chair is that it actually moves sort of with your body while you're sitting in general, as well as when you're reclining. What I mean by that is the armrests and headrests actually move with you while you recline in this, which is something I haven't really had before in a chair, and I wasn't really expecting this, so I'm glad they actually thought of this. And probably one of the coolest features that has made LiberNovo viral over the past year or so is the 3000 milliamp hour battery, which does provide power to a good chunk of features on here, such as the built-in massage mode, as well as the seat fan, which I'll touch on both of these shortly. Easily enough, this is rechargeable through Type-C as well, and there hasn't really been a time where I've ran out of battery, but this will vary depending on your use case. And overall, from an ergonomic standpoint, there is an adjustment point along the way for pretty much anything you might need. With all this adjustability, this leads directly into what LiberNovo calls dynamic support, which pretty much combines their synchro-link mechanisms with dynamic screen alignment, which means the chair is actively designed to keep your line of sight leveled with your display, even when you are actually shifting around, leaning back, and just simply using this chair. It is one of those things you don't particularly realize you need until you're deep into sort of a long work session or so, which is just being able to recline without having to tilt your head or constantly readjust your posture just to stay focused on your monitor, which has been a total game changer for long-term comfort. As for the actual cushion in the seat, I can say this is comfortable, which is a total understatement. And that goes for the backrest as well, but this is where the chair sort of starts to shine for larger people, mainly because it does have a seat depth of 52 centimeters, whereas a normal chair might typically range somewhere in the 40s. What's great about this is if you are tall, you already know you're losing a good chunk of support on your lower thighs, and your legs sort of end up dangling over the edge of a lot of chairs, so you might even get tingly in the legs, sort of with pressure and cutting off your circulation a little bit. And since this chair goes deep for taller people, this is a literal non-issue. In terms of the actual material in the seat cushion, this has something I've never thought about as well. Granted, I'm not really making chairs, but this has multiple firmnesses to the actual cushion you sit on. For example, the rear of this seat is a little bit more firm to better support your sit bones and weight, whereas the front is a little softer, where again, you typically have that section that would be digging into your thighs. So in this case, it really does feel like people who actually sit in chairs day in, day out thought about how to make this chair. So kudos to LiberNovo in that sense. Still, it does feel plush to touch, and the fabric on here feels soft, and it's definitely breathable, which I'll show why in just a moment. Now, I won't pretend pretend like I know what a Danish Gabriel Atlantic fabric is, but I can say it does feel damn good to touch. And if anybody in the comment section is a tactile master, let me know how this weighs in compared to other fabrics. But separately from that, the actual seat being comfortable, there is an added bonus here, which comes in with the controls on the armrest, which does activate an actual fan that's built into the seat itself if you are using the airflow model. If anybody else knows about having a long session, whether you're working or gaming, you might typically get a little swampy, if you know what I mean. And this fan does help keep things a lot cooler with its 4,000 RPM, which does give a solid amount of downwards airflow. Now, I've seen people online test this with dry ice or smoke pens and stuff. I personally have neither of them, but what I do have is super cozy incense, and you can see how this chair actually pulls that thick incense down into the chair using the fan, so it really does provide a solid downward airflow. This fan also does have two strengths, low and high, depending on your preference, and I typically use the low version. Both modes are a little bit audible when you're using it, but it is more of a low hum. Now, one of the things that I do appreciate here too is the fact that I literally just don't want to have to think about it. So once I do turn this thing on, I can actually get up and out of my chair, and that fan will turn off automatically to conserve battery, which is pretty awesome. And as soon as I sit back down, it does turn back on. As for the battery, of course, you are going to get about 9 hours if you're using the fan on high, and 14 hours or more if you are using it on low setting, which again, you can just swap with the controls on the armrest. Now, separately from the controls on the armrest though, they are still armrests, and naturally they're going to be excellent from an armrest standpoint because, again, being big and tall, these actually do support my weight well enough, and they don't really feel floppy like a lot of armrests that are typically found on regular size chairs. In terms of adjustabilities, they do move upwards, downwards by 5 inches or so, which is great because I'm actually a chair tucker. Whenever I'm sitting at my desk, I actually just rest my arms on the desk itself versus the armrests, which I do use in other setups, whether I'm reclining or just leaning back. And again, I can just adjust these as needed when I'm gaming because I use the armrests a lot when I'm playing console games because I'm typically holding a controller. These do swivel as well if you do need them to, and there is a good level of adjustments here depending on how wide your frame is. And another feature here that's sort of one of those specific things that you'd see for larger people is that these actually have a solid increased width with these sort of arc-shaped designs for the armrests themselves, which does help keep the armrest from digging into your waist, but you can still adjust these inwards and outwards as needed. I can say though, since this is a pre-production model, my arms don't lock into place here, but this will be included upon mass manufacturing, so I figured I would mention that. Now, it's not that I've tried a million chairs out, but something I can really truly appreciate specifically is when I'm reclined at the 160-degree angle, the armrests actually move backwards and flow with me because I think they sit on some sort of rail system. I'm not even sure in this case, but it makes it so that they're not awkward to use and they become actually usable. And of course, there are the other buttons on the armrest here, which I haven't touched on yet. 2 for the electric lumbar adjustments if you do have an electric model, and another button here, which is probably my favorite feature on this chair entirely. Now, when it comes to this backrest, this is one of those things where once you have it, it's almost hard not to have, but the backrest does have these sort of 8 panels that sort of flex with the different joints that are also on here, which really does do a good job at providing support, but still sort of allows you to move naturally and freely whenever you are sitting down. And as much as I do love something like my Herman Miller embody chair, the backrest is noticeably thinner compared to my Maxis Airflow, and it almost feels overly thin having gotten used to this chair over the last month or so, and it's sort of been one of the major pain points for me on that chair. And again, it's quite hard not to love a chair like the Maxis Airflow that's quite literally built for somebody my size. Now, measurement wise, if you do care, the bottom has a width of 520 millimeters, the top width of 430, and the actual entire backrest height is 630 millimeters. But similarly to the seat as well, this does have solid cushioning on the backrest, and it is still supported, and which leads me into what's probably my favorite feature on this chair, and that's going to be the motorized lumbar support and massage feature on here. This is adjustable using the armrest buttons, of course, and I could be wrong, but I don't think this is a linear press for just the lumbar. It sort of feels like it's arcing upwards a little bit, which is a good thing I find. So where it sort of seems to start at the lumbar area, that arc does push upwards to give further back support, which does lead me into the whole massage feature. Now, while I'm not smart enough to know whether or not this is actually a massage, it does feel more like a 5-minute spine decompression cycle. And when I say I use this a lot, I really have used this an absurd amount, more than I thought I would having just read about it. For me at least, I like to throw on a show, a movie, or just play some video games, and I'll throw on 1 or 4 of these massage cycles, and it's sort of become a nightly thing for me before bed. Likewise as well, the headrest is something I got to talk about because it seems seemingly well thought out, being that it's a solid U shape, and it actually cradles my head, which is nice. And again, like the rest of the chair, there is a surprising amount of adjustability here with 110 millimeter horizontal travel and 140 millimeter vertical travel. So you really are going to be covered even if you are on the top end at 6'7". And of course, as I mentioned, the headrest does follow well while reclining, which is a huge plus, but you can still adjust this forward and backwards as well as up and down. As with the rest of the seat and backrest, it's supportive yet soft, and my fat head has 0 complaints. And again, one notable thing here is that when I am reclined, my head actually still feels well supported despite my weight. Now, you can buy this separately as well, but the leg rest here is a little bit of a cute bonus, which I have grown to appreciate. And this does end end up adding to the experience while I'm fully reclined specifically. It ends up just being wildly comfy between the fan, the spine decompression, and the all-around comfort here. I just end up enjoying it. If you are sitting up completely, there is a bottom right here you can rest your feet, which does help with all-around ergonomics. Now, for any reason, if you still want a big and tall chair like the Maxis, there are other versions here if you don't want all the bells and whistles like the fan or the electric lumbar, or both. You can still decide what you want. For people who are looking for a more budget-friendly option, there is the Maxis manual, which still keeps all the same adjustabilities and ergonomic functions, but this does have a manual lumbar adjustment instead of electrical. And then there is the electric version, which is a step above that, but it does not include the seat fan if you don't care to use that, but will still give you the electric lumbar adjustments if you want it. And of course, there's the Maxis Airflow, which is the one that I'm using, and this does have the electric lumbar alongside that fan for the airflow. And of course, warranty-wise, all the electronic components do have a 2-year warranty, so you are going to be covered on that side of things. And overall, I can actually say I'm impressed with this chair, and this will be my main chair going forward because it's just nice to have something well built like this for somebody who is big and tall like myself. And I will be talking more about this chair more organically outside of this sponsored video in my upcoming desk setup overhaul, since I'm actually moving, and I will let you guys know what my opinion is on this chair about 2 or 3 months later. When I am all set up, I will have the LiberNovo Maxis link down below alongside the other options if you do want to check them out. I do appreciate you all watching till the end. Till next time.
Down.